Hey parents, just a heads up. Our podcast today dives into some grown-up topics. So, if you've got little ones around, you might want to hit pause or just save this one for a different time.
Welcome to These Are Good Days with Leanne Miller.
And Matt Barris.
Well, Matt.
Yes, Leanne.
We've had a little show and tell of all your recent Disney
We did.
paraphernalia and nostalgic gifts.
Did. Oh, can I tell them about the one that I just showed you?
Sure.
That's so good. We were at Mallory's grandma's house over the holidays, and there, Mallory's mom and dad gifted us. Do you remember, like in the 90s, when those typewriter tray boxes were popular?
Yes.
Like the typesetting
Almost
drawers.
like little nook.
Yeah. And people would put little
knick-knack.
tchotchkes in it.
Yes.
So Mallory's parents would collect little souvenirs. So you know what they gave us was the drawer with their Disney tchotchkes.
Okay.
So we went to Mallory's grandma's house over the holidays. We spent a great time with her. And she has this pewter, like Disney train. Each little car is like 2 inches tall. And it's so cute. And she bought it when she went to Disney with Mallory.
You need to picture this on your Instagram.
She bought it when she went to Disney when Mallory was a kid. They all went as a family together. When Mallory was maybe 5 or 6.
Okay.
And so she said, I want you guys to take it home now because I know that you'll love it and you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
And so
Mallory
it is
was
precious.
5 or 6 when she bought it. How old is Mallory now?
She is going to be 40 soon.
Wow, that's like an antique.
I know.
That's so good.
Hey, you're 55.
Okay, good day.
My good day would be, I know it's been a while, but I'm still thinking about it, is New Year's Eve. We went to Columbus and we visited some of Mallory's college friends. And we had talked on the podcast last week about planning stuff. So these are the friends we're going to see on Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend. We saw them for New Year's Eve. But our friend Disney Danielle, she planned some Minute to Win It games for the kids, and we had a sleepover at our friend Maggie and Matt's house with our kids.
That's good.
And it was just so fun. This is so silly, but I remember my mom and dad used to host New Year's Eve parties for their friends. And my sister and I on this, like the weird like vortex of time between Christmas and New Year's Eve.
Right.
My sister and I would make confetti sometimes. And my parents, God love them, they had this lazy boy chair that was so comfortable, but it had all these pillowy nooks and crannies. And whenever we had New Year's Eve, we would throw the confetti everywhere. It was like the one time a year my dad didn't care about that.
Yeah.
And so my parents would find confetti falling out of that chair for months.
Funny.
And so, it's fun as a parent now to have those memories of what my parents did for us on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
And now we're trying to make those memories with our kids. So even though it was a while ago, it's just still rolling around in my brain.
And the invisible or the value in that is if you do it year after year after year, all of a sudden your kids are teenagers.
That's right.
And you're still doing that same tradition, and it really does matter. It really makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay,
What about you?
My good day. Well, Matt.
Good day. You can't have a second Matt.
My good day is you.
Me?
Yes, we have some great days in the studio, but then we have, our live event coming up soon.
That's right.
Very soon.
January 20th.
And Be Fearless, who we love, Be Fearless at Home and Be Fearless Boutique. We went down to their stores, spent some time there, and they styled me for the January 20th event with an outfit. And you, Mr. Matt, Mugman Matt, got a pair of Birkenstocks and got some little cute things. And, because they don't carry men's clothing, but they do carry an incredible line of Birkenstocks. Really incredible line. And they also have incredible Crocs there. They have a huge line of Crocs there too. So that was a fun day. That was a fun thing. And we love our relationships with our local people, our local stores. So, yeah.
Well, and that, we had talked last week about having things planned when January or post holidays feel hard. And I know from your Instagram, and we talked about this, is it's hard to let your kids go.
Yeah.
I mean, you had such a wonderful break.
Yes.
We talked about how Mallory and I brought the kids over, and visited with your adult children, which I think we were reminiscing about some of the silly things that I did with your boys when I lived with you about like, but your boys were in like third or fourth grade. Joey was in like
Joey was about the same age as Luca.
Yeah. And so your boys were like pre-teenagers when I moved in with you. And
we
now
had so much fun.
They are adults.
Yeah.
And they have their own lives going on.
They have their own houses.
Yeah, Teddy, both of them own houses.
Both of them own houses now.
They, are in relationships and they are grown men. And honest to God, I know people aren't supposed to keep growing, but I think your son Teddy continues to grow because I gave him a hug and I was like, what? Yeah. I swear your shoulders are taller than the last time I hugged you.
He's so tall. He's just a really tall guy, and he gets it from his grandfathers. They were both very tall.
Yeah.
And okay, so when your kids come home and you have such a great time, and that's not everybody's story.
Right.
There can be the opposite of that where you have estrangement, which is also very hard. When your kids come home and you have a great experience, there is the reality of them starting to pack up to leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when that is happening, you're faced with, wow, they don't live here anymore.
Right.
And, I have to really train myself mentally and emotionally to focus on, to look at like, look how they're flourishing. Look how great
both of your boys.
Look how great they're doing. Do I want them, like, come on, Leanne, do you want them to be living here at 28 and 24 in the basement? No, I don't want that. But it's just the passing of time and the letting go of the season that you're in right now.
Right.
Like you listen, here is I think a very common thing. When you're in the throes of your little kids being at home,
10, 6, and 3,
you don't think about that with each day that passes, you're getting closer to the letting go. You're in it. Like you're in it. You're busy. You're cleaning out book bags. You're buying new pants because they're growing so fast.
So true.
You're making sure they have all the things on the list for the next party at school, whatever. And you're in it. So you're not thinking to yourself, like, savor this little party at school where they want to dress up as something crazy. Savor the school picture days because it's all just passing through your fingers like so quickly. And then you're standing in your kitchen watching your kids pack up to go to their houses and you're like, where did it go?
Yeah.
Where did that time go? And there's just this, I call it like just this dull, soft hollowness within me as a parent when they walk out the door.
Yeah.
And I am responsible then for filling that with the right kind of emotions because a very lazy, very easy thing to do is to say some things that actually make your children feel guilty.
Right.
Like,
or push them away.
So when is the next time you're coming home? Because this was the first time that we saw you for 2 months. Like those kind of comments are born out of that soft, doll hollowness that you crave your children back, but they're not helpful. Those comments are not helpful. You have to get to a place where you say, this was the best holiday. And by the way, I noticed you didn't have a soup kettle at your house, so please take mine. And you make them feel big when they leave.
Absolutely.
You make them feel good about having come home and good about going back to their house instead of like, oh, mom's sad and mom wishes I was coming home more and mom wishes that we would have stayed longer, because those are not productive, healthy. I'm noticing as our kids are adults that I still have a choice what to build into our relationship and our life.
100%.
I refuse to be a parent of adult kids that sits back and says, well, it would be nice if you called me every now and then.
Right.
Or when they do call, to say, well, it's about time. I haven't heard from you since last week. Don't say that stuff.
Right.
You might feel it, and it might be true.
And it's just going to push them right away.
And it might be true. You might feel it. But a conversation to have would be, hey, do you have a minute that we could have a conversation?
Right. Exactly.
Where I could tell you some of the ways that I've been feeling.
Right.
So it's something that we could work on.
Right.
As a mother-daughter or a mother-son. Because when you say things that blanket them or kind of shadow them in shame and guilt,
right,
and fear of what you're thinking or whatever,
right,
it doesn't build a good adult relationship with your kids.
And I think, Leanne, what I'd like to hear from you is, this doesn't start when they go to college, or this doesn't start when they're 27 and they buy their first house.
No,
this starts when they're home. And what does that look like for you?
Oh, no, I'm going to tell you what it looks like. It looks like when they're 10, 6, and 3, and you're going to somebody's house, that you have a conversation that says, hey, let's talk about when we're guests at people's house. Like, how are we, how do you think that we should behave at Yaya and Dee's? Or when they come home and they're crying because they've been left out. Right. And you say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how we feel. Let's talk about how we feel. Let's talk about ways that we can handle this. Let's talk about some approaches to take tomorrow when we go back to school. I think there's a missing element sometimes with parenting, that we forget to have conversations with our kids, to really talk to our kids. We have conversations over the holidays. I mean, you know this because I told you, but over the holidays, we have sometimes what we call family meeting.
Right.
And I was telling the boys about something, and they said, we need to have a family meeting.
Right.
And that wasn't me saying we need to have a family meeting. They said we need to have a family meeting.
Like where everybody hears it together.
Yes. So
we all hash it out.
We all four sit down. We all talk about where we are in our life. We take notes.
Right.
And we have a conversation because we are all part of it.
Right.
You know, just because you're a parent doesn't mean you're the know all, end all, be all authoritarian.
Right.
And I think when they cross over into adulthood, sometimes there's an oversight of, like, this is an adult now. I am no longer telling them what to do.
Right.
And I think even as parenting, when they're in high school, to sit down and have conversations. It's not about like, you are allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this.
Right.
It's okay, let's talk about why this makes sense.
Absolutely.
Why we are saying, I would say a big one for us when the kids were teenagers, not with Teddy because he was an old man, but with Joey, was curfew.
Yeah.
Everybody else gets to stay out till midnight. Why do I have to be home at 11:30?
Right.
Why do I have to be home at 11? And we would sit and have a conversation.
Right.
So, Joey, tell us, what are you doing between 11 and midnight if you've been with your friends all evening?
Right.
That is so important that you can't leave and come home a little bit earlier because of the statistics that we know are true of drunk drivers on the road.
Right.
And we would have these conversations where he was part of the ownership of the decision.
Right.
Instead of saying, like, you are going to be home at 11:30, and if you are 5 minutes late, you are going to be grounded.
Right. Exactly.
You know, and which was how I was parented. Right. I always wanted more of an explanation and more of an answer. So I think that if anything, we erred on the side of over communicating. And I say we loosely because it was more me, but I will say, and I told you this as well, and you experienced it, you saw it when you were at my house over the holidays, is people think that Daryl doesn't talk. That's not true.
It's not true.
I mean, Daryl and the boys were in lots of conversations over the holidays, like deep conversations. Right. Also, very surfacey conversations about football.
Also, Daryl's a little more spicy than people think.
Oh,
he can be a little sass box. Honestly, you might need to wash his mouth out with soap because sometimes he gets a little sassy.
He gets a little bit sassy.
You know, here's something that I was recently talking with a friend about for us. A big thing. Well, here's my first thought is an educational term that truly came from the building world is called scaffolding. So, you know, when you build a house or you build a building, around the building, before you let the building stand on its own 2 feet or on its own foundation, it's surrounded by scaffolding. And the scaffolding's there so that you can fortify the walls, you can make sure everything's right. You know, you can easily walk up 4 flights and see what's going on everywhere. And then as you know that the building has a good foundation, that it's doing well, you slowly remove the scaffolding. It's the same thing in education when we're teaching kids to read. When they first start to read or do math or learn a new concept, the teacher's supposed to be really involved. And as we see that they're kind of catching it, we're supposed to pull back. The same thing with parenting. You know, we are scaffolding with our children so that when they come to an age where they can be independent, we can with confidence feel like we can pull that scaffolding away. And I was connecting that for me with where our kids are right now in regards to technology. We talked last week that we bought our child a Kindle. Our kids, maybe an unpopular opinion, our kids have tablets that we let them use. Now, here's what that looks like for us. My wife, they're all Kindles, and my wife can manage everything that's on there. They don't have internet access. And, you know, everybody has a different opinion about this, but here's where we kind of landed. I don't anticipate when our children turn 18 that they will never interact with technology. I don't anticipate that our kids, when they get a car, will never not go anywhere. I know that when my kids leave my house, that they're going to have access. The world will literally be at their fingertips in regards to technology specifically. So I have a choice. I can choose to say, hey, my kids aren't going to have any access to technology, and you know, they're not going to have any interaction with this for fear of things that are legitimate. I don't want my kids talking to creepy people on the internet. I don't want my kids to have access to anything that's on the internet. You know, I don't want my kids playing games where they can talk to grown men that are behind a screen. However, I also don't want my kids to have nothing so that when they turn 18, they've never been scaffolded towards responsibility or they've never been coached.
I mean, Matt, how many people have we seen that have been protected?
Listen, girl.
And then in college, I saw it.
Listen, me too. We both went to Christian college.
And then they get to college and it's like, wow.
Yeah, I have a friend who showed up to Cedarville as a stereotypical evangelical conservative, denim jumpers, embroidered, King James Version only. You think of it, that's who she was. By the time she was gone, she had gone off the deep end and went completely the other way. And I think for me, it's important. And what I'm really getting at with you and your kids in this conversation about letting your kids go is I don't think there's a decision when they turn 18 that we're like, now they're adults. I think if we do that, we are setting our children up for failure. However, if we look at my 10-year-old Luca and we say, you know, you're 10, I think you can have a Kindle. Now we're going to talk about what books we push out there.
Absolutely.
Or he has a Kindle tablet. Mom and dad are going to vet every app that goes on that right now. But guess what? You're going to have some access to technology because the conversations that I want to have are, how much time do you think is appropriate to spend on your Kindle? What kind of apps are good? Lucas, show me what apps you're doing. Show me what you're building in this app. How does your brain feel if you've been on technology too long? Oh man, you're really tired and grouchy today. Maybe you were on too much technology.
These are conversations.
Those conversations. That is gold. And I have...
Instead of this, Matt, well, you know what? You're being grumpy and rude. You've been on your Kindle too long, so you're going to get it taken care of. You're going to get it taken away for 3 days because you don't know how. You know, those kind of authoritarian, disciplinarian approaches, oh, yeah. You know what? You can get a result.
Absolutely.
But guess what? When they turn 17, 18, 19, 20... you will also get a result at that age for that kind of parenting.
Well, and listen, I have I'm going to keep using my 10-year-old as an example.
Well, yeah, because he's getting into that age where you're handing over more responsibility to him.
Absolutely. And we have a limited amount of time where we can scaffold and coach and have those conversations. I've said this to so many people. I would rather have conversations and set them up with experiences where their consequences are minimal. So what I mean by that is Luca's not at an age where he's going to steal a car, But if I can teach Luca responsibility around how to use technology, the consequences around that are very minimal at this age. We can't wait till he's 18 to be like, go have fun and we'll talk about it.
And here's an iPhone.
Right. And the reality is, legally in America, he doesn't have to include me in a lot of stuff after he's 18.
That's right.
He's not required to.
Right.
He can do a lot of whatever the heck he wants.
Right.
So I look at this period, especially like third grade when they're 8, 9, 10 years old to the time they're 18. Obviously, we're laying a foundation before that. But we are in a season where we are intentionally coaching him towards a responsible adulthood.
Right.
Because those times, this is like our learning lab where I control the consequences. I control, I want to set him up. You control
the parameters and the framework and the rules.
But I have not seen great success when we go from nothing to everything.
Yes.
So I want to give him slow responsibilities and slow access to things. I know.
Well, I love the scaffolding example.
Yeah.
Because that's like taking, now we're going to take the first row scaffolding
Absolutely.
down. Then the next row scaffolding down.
Absolutely.
Then the next row scaffolding
There's
down.
probably, while he's in our life, in our home, there's probably going to be a time where we give him his own library card and we don't know everything he's reading.
And let me just tell you.
Because when he's 17 or 18, I don't know if I want to big brother him.
Yeah.
Because there's going to come a point where I don't think that's healthy.
Matt, we did everything that we thought was right with the cell phone situation.
Right.
And with technology. And we had a hard time.
Yeah, you had some hard times with your kids.
We had some hard times. But we still remain vigilant. We didn't give up.
Right.
We didn't go, well, it's not working, so just
free for all.
Right. Have at it.
No.
We kept making the parameters. And
Absolutely.
one thing that my boys, and you can steal this line for your own children if you want. One thing our boys, this was the phrase, well, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else has it. Everybody else. And I would say, well, we are not raising you to be everybody else.
Absolutely.
We are raising you to be a leader. We are raising you to be strong. We are raising you to say, hey, I have to go home early because my curfew is at 11:30.
Right.
And to be confident in that.
Absolutely.
And so now our boys are very confident people.
Your boys are.
They are. They're very sound. They're very confident. They're very fair.
Right.
Teddy will have these conversations and I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Because he's saying, now, Mom, that's not altogether fair to say that. Have you thought about this with this situation?
Right.
And I think that has come from having the conversations.
Absolutely.
Make time for conversations in the evening with your kids. They will tell you so much if you carve out the time to sit and listen to them and push past this is so common with boys. How was your day today? Good. So what'd you do? Well, nothing. I mean, it was fine. Push past that. Like I would always say, well, you had a poster today due in Miss Steiner's class. How did you feel about that when you turned it in? Did other kids turn theirs in on time? And who do you feel like's doing really well in that class? And just dig. And your kids will tell you things.
Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, my kids told me stuff. I'll be like, oh, I didn't know about that.
You're like, don't react.
I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that with that little girl.
That's so funny.
I remember one time, Joey came home and asked me what a blowjob was.
Oh, Lord.
Or a BJ.
Oh, Lord. I'm sweating. We might have people listening to this in the car with their children.
Sorry. Maybe we should do a disclaimer at the beginning. And I needed to explain that to him.
Right.
And I asked him where he heard that. He said, oh, so-and-so. So-and-so is in the basement with their boyfriend doing that.
What grade was this?
He was in junior high.
Okay.
And the girl was in high school.
Yeah.
So-and-so, people at school are saying so-and-so is in the basement with their boyfriend doing this to him. And I'm like, and now I need to explain this. And
were you like, don't freak out. Don't freak out.
Yes.
Don't freak out. Yeah.
Yes. And also, I don't think my child's ever going to go over to their house.
Right. But you know what? You had a choice in that moment.
Oh.
Here's the thing. This is where we keep coming back to, is you could have said, you know what? You don't need to know about that. And that's inappropriate.
Yes.
And we're not talking about that.
And guess what he's going to do? He's going to
find out from somebody else.
Find somebody to tell him what that is.
And so I think you have a choice in those moments as a parent to say, hey, we're gonna dig in, and it might be so uncomfortable. We had the same experience with our child, and here's my cryptic way to say it. in third grade, he would avoid saying the number between 68 and 70.
Oh,
and
yes,
he
this happened to
acted
us too.
so weird about that. And I was like, well, what do you know about that?
Yeah.
And where did you hear about this?
And
you know,
listen, here's another great thing to say. Oh, interesting. Well, who is having that conversation? Who is talking that way? Because you will find out.
Right.
Who's having the conversations, and sometimes it was our very own children. I'm not saying our kids were perfect.
Yeah.
But you will find out if you create conversations and safe places, your kids will come and they will talk to you about things that feel very disarming, very awkward, very like, oh my goodness, if I ever meet that kid, I can't. If I ever meet that kid, I'm gonna rip his head off. But it's a window and an insight into what your kids are walking through and what they're dealing with at school.
Well, and here's the other thing. When you shut down your kids, or when, I'll say this even in discipline, when you say, because I said so, are there times where that's appropriate? Absolutely. That is not the norm in our house. And I go back to what Andy Stanley says. This is one of my favorite things in regards to parenting, is he says, rules without relationship lead to rebellion. Rules without relationship lead to rebellion. And I totally agree with that.
I believe it.
Because here's the thing. When we push down rules on our kids, when we just say, because I said so, and that's the norm, again, there's a place for listening to authority. As adults, there are times where I've had a boss. Yes. There are times where my wife asks me to trust her with what she says. There are times where I have to trust people, authority in our life. That has its place.
Right.
But at the same time, that all the time, that's going to lead to them rebelling against whatever it is you're saying.
Right.
So for me, it takes more time to dig into the conversations and to ask deeper questions. However, all of those little things, when you go into those awkward conversations with your kids, or you figure out what's going on with the teacher and who's the kid that you're hanging out with and what are you talking about, all that stuff, that is not digging into something. That the fruit of that is you're cultivating a relationship with your kid where you can have more and more open conversations. Because when you have those open conversations and you cultivate that relationship, that is what's going to pay off in their responsibility in the future.
Yes.
My mom would tell me growing up, I'm not your friend, and I'm not your friend now. I'm your parent. And because we're creating this relationship where I am giving you some rules. We'll talk about it. We'll go through all the steps, but I'm still the authority. And she said, because when you become an adult, my goal is that we are friends, and that you do want to share with me. Because here's the reality. Your boys have zero responsibility to tell you anything about their life at this point. They don't really need you for anything.
Yep, it's true.
I don't need my mom for anything in my life. Now, your boys and I want to be around our moms because our moms have created relationships with us over years and years of dialogue and care and love. But at this point in life, your boys have zero obligation to you. And so as the parent, I think it's your responsibility to continue to cultivate that relationship through different seasons of life.
Yes.
And so, that foundation and that scaffolding that's been laid, my mom and you, that's paying off.
Right.
Because I want to be around my mom. I want my mom's advice and wisdom. I want to run things by her. The same thing with your boys. Your boys want to talk to you about stuff when they don't have to.
Well, okay. So example of when they were teens versus adult and decisions. So when they were teenagers, my boys both had this, you remember it, they had this phase where they wanted mopeds. They wanted mopeds to drive to school at like 13, 14, 15.
Was that cool? Or did they just have the idea?
Nobody did it. And I think they just had the idea and they thought it would be cool. And we said no. And mainly me. I said no because we are in Amish country, very curvy roads, very hilly roads. And there were two intersections on the way to school that were incredibly dangerous. And I'm like, no, you're not doing this. This is not happening. Well, then we turned 16, 17. It became about a motorcycle. They both wanted motorcycles. We want a motorcycle. I said, no way. No way because the insurance, no way because you're 17, 18 years old, your frontal lobe is not fully developed. You're going to do something stupid like race.
Right.
No, you're not having a motorcycle. Well, our youngest son turns 23 and he calls me.
I remember
he
this.
calls me one day and he says, Mom, I think it's time that 22 or 23. He says, I think it's time that I have my own insurance. I go on my own insurance because for both of our boys, we kept them on we kept their cars on our insurance for a little while until they got on their feet. He says, I need to have my own. And I thought, oh, how responsible. He's wanting to go on his own insurance. And so we take his car off our insurance. And that was wonderful. Like you cross this bridge and you're like, oh, they're not on our insurance anymore. I was like, how nice. Well, it was because he was buying a motorcycle.
Dun, dun, dun.
So he didn't tell me that he was buying a motorcycle because he knew that I was not going to be happy about it, supportive of it. But our boys have always told at least one of their parents what. Now, and some people, this could be some people
unhealthy.
might not agree with this, and it could be unhealthy for some people. But in our family dynamic, it is not.
Right.
Joey called Daryl, had the conversation, said, I want to tell Mom. I just want to wait for the right timing. But I'm buying a motorcycle. So he buys this motorcycle. And one day he comes home and he says, Mom, I came home because I want to have a conversation with you and I want to tell you about something. Because I had been wanting to give him, he's been transitioning in his job, hasn't had a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
He needs a little help. So I had been wanting to give him some money. And he's like, the reason I'm not okay with you giving me money and I don't want you to give me money, I need to explain to you why. Can we sit down and each have a cup of coffee and have this conversation? And I'm like, oh, this is... What are we getting ready to have happen here? And it was, I don't want to take money from you because or receive money from you because I bought a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And so I'm paying that insurance. And Dad knows about it. And because I felt like, one of you needed to know about it and how I need to have the conversation, but I wanted to wait for the right. He didn't want to just call me over the phone and tell me. And I sat there and I didn't say a whole lot. And later he said to me, oh, Mom, you handled that so much better than I thought you would. And I said, well, honey, you're an adult now and I don't like it. I still don't like it. My first cousin was killed on a motorcycle. And I'm like, I don't want you to have a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. There are way too many distracted drivers on the road right now. And I don't want you to have a motorcycle. But now at this age, I can't sit there and cry and scream and yell at you or be like, this is so disappointing. Why did you make that choice? I don't want you to have a motorcycle. You're an adult.
Right.
But as an adult, he's making completely different decisions with that motorcycle than he would at 17 and 18.
Totally.
So he says he understands why we were saying no at 17 and 18.
Right.
Because he's been on that motorcycle and he has
seen that it's not as
and it's
flawless as he thought it was.
And it can be a little scary.
Right.
And so
does he still have it?
So oh yeah. So he loves it, but he has leathers, he has a helmet, he wears a helmet, he has the right kind of boots, and he's like, Mom, right now I don't drive on the interstate. I don't drive on the highway. It's just for me, I don't feel confident enough. So I just go the streets to the gym and back and until I just get really used to being on the motor. So now he's making these adult decisions as he's riding that motorcycle versus at 17.
Totally.
So, it's the parenting, being a parent to adults is a whole different ball game, but I do love the season. And I do think still having the conversations, we still have the conversations we were having at 8, 10, 12, 16. We're still having them.
Yeah.
They're participating in the conversations now a little more wholeheartedly. They understand them. There's a reason they say, let's have family meeting. Because at 12, we were saying we need to sit down and have a family meeting about our grades or about homework, about how we're going to handle sports, how we're going to be in musicals. Like we would do those things. We would do family meeting. So it's just crossed over, and now we have family meeting with adult kids who are like, they're initiating the family meeting.
I love that. So here's my parting shot is if you remember one thing from this episode, it's that Andy Stanley quote for me. It's rules without relationship leads to rebellion.
Yeah.
And
talk
so
to your kids. Talk to your
kids. It is so, for me, we didn't talk about things like sex. like openly.
Oh, we
it's
didn't
awkward.
either.
And so when your kid comes home and says, I heard this at school, my kid heard some colorful words in 3rd grade that I was like, I don't want to explain this. Yes. But when you power through that, it builds such a sense of trust and deep connection.
And I promise you, they're going to ask somebody else if you don't tell them. That's right.
I would much rather give them the adult version that I want them to hear at this age. You know, when my son came with the question about that specific number in the upper 60s, I asked him what he thought, and I told him what I wanted him to know, which wasn't everything. You know, that's not everything that I know about that number.
Right.
I told him some things about it, and I stopped and I said, do you feel like you need to know more, or do you feel like you kind of understand what I'm saying? And he said, I don't want to know any more right now, Dad. And I felt like that was kind of a good thing, because I felt like I gave him a good 3rd grade answer.
Yes.
And he was satisfied with that right now.
Yes.
Now, is that going to come up when he's 12, 17?
Yes.
Sure. I'm sure that will.
Right.
But for right now, I am able to control. This is where the control comes in. It's not control manipulative. It's control as in what they're ready for.
Right.
I am able to give him what he's ready for at the age of 10 without having him go search for that somewhere else. And
good.
So my hope is that as we scaffold and lay that foundation with our kids, that they see us as a reliable, trusted, confident source for them that gives them wisdom and truth.
Right.
So that's really what I want.
That's good.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation about parenting.
Yeah.
And what does it look like to lay that foundation for our kids? This is such a good one. And Leanne, thanks for, I'll say this. I'm so thankful that I have always had a front row seat to your family.
Yes,
you know, from living with you. I think I lived with you for almost 3 years. And now I still get to watch you as you parent adults. And I'm just so thankful that you let us into those little glimpses of your life. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, whether ordinary or extraordinary, we hope you see that these are good days.
This episode brought to you by Walnut Creek Foods. Walnut Creek Foods is a company in the heart of Ohio's Amish country. It's family owned and operated, and there is a fantastic store in Walnut Creek featuring all of the product made by Walnut Creek Foods. I've worked with Walnut Creek Foods since 2008, and they have my full endorsement as a trusted brand. WCF is nationwide, so check out your local grocer. They may just carry this wholesome brand. For more information, check out walnutcreekcheese.com or walnutcreekfoods.com.